Hey, good day to you. This is Todd. I am a regular dude walking in the Word. Today we are actually concluding, not Leviticus, but we're concluding chapter 25 in Leviticus. And we've talked about in this chapter, the year of Jubilee, the Sabbath year, and then we talked about being redeemed. Today I want to talk about this last section here, and it's dealing with really not profiting off your brothers, your Israelite brothers. Okay, if a fellow Israelite was to fall into hard times, we weren't supposed to set up title loans and things like that to profit off of that person going into hard times. We could do it off the foreigner, but not off the fellow Israelite. And so God set that up so that the Israelites would be taking care of each other, not trying to profit off of each other. Now, did this continue to happen? Or did this happen then later on? Yeah, it happened. The prophets brought this up and said, you know what? You guys are charging interest, and you're taking your fellow Israelites as slaves and all kinds of things like that. That needs to stop, okay? And so, but this is what God initially set up, and the people were supposed to follow that. They didn't always follow that, but they were supposed to. And so let's look at how God proposed that everything should operate here. And it's entitled, Do Not Profit Off Your Brothers. And this is taken from Leviticus chapter 25, verses 35 to 55. Okay? It says this: if any of your fellow Israelites become poor and are unable to support themselves among you, help them as you would a foreigner or a stranger, so that they can continue to live among you. Okay? And earlier on, it talked about how you're supposed to take care of the foreigner and the stranger that comes among you. Don't just kick them out, but take care of them. Verse 36, do not take interest or any profit from them, but fear your God, so that they may continue to live among you. Okay? So you could loan them money, but don't be charging interest on it. Okay? No payday loans, no title loans, none of that goofy stuff. You could loan them money, but there was interest free. Okay? You must not lend them money at an interest or sell them food at a profit. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan and to be your God. If any of your fellow Israelites become poor and sell themselves to you, do not make them work as slaves. They are to be treated as hired workers or temporary residents among you. They are to work for you until the year of Jubilee. Then they and their children are to be released, and they will go back to their own clans and to their own property of their ancestors. Because the Israelites are my servants, whom I brought out of Egypt, they must not be sold as slaves. Do not rule over them ruthlessly, but fear your God. Okay? They had been slaves in Egypt, and God doesn't want them to come out into the promised land and then enslave each other. That was happening, later on, but God didn't want that, and actually gets onto them about that. So they saw it was happening to them, and so you'd have the temptation to do it to each other. But God says, no, that's not going to happen. You're going to treat each other as brothers and not profit on them. And especially, he says here too, when you give them food, don't be hiking up the price of the food on it too. Just give it to them at your cost. Verse 44, your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around you. From them you may buy slaves. You may also buy some of the temporary residents living among you, and then the members of their clans, born in your country, and they will become your property. You can bequeath them to your children as an inherited property and can make them slaves for life. But you must not rule over your fellow Israelites ruthlessly. If a foreigner residing among you becomes rich, and any of your fellow Israelites becomes poor and sells themselves to the foreigner or to a member of the foreigner's clan, they retain the right of redemption after they've sold themselves. One of their relatives may redeem them. An uncle or a cousin or a blood relative in their clan may redeem them. Or if they prosper, they may redeem themselves. They and their buyer are to count the time from the year of Jubilee, they sold themselves up to the year of Jubilee. The price for their release is to be based on the rate paid to a hired worker for the number of years. If many years remain, they must pay for the redemption a larger share of the price paid for them. If only a few years remain until the year of Jubilee, they are to compute that and pay for their redemption accordingly. They are to be treated as workers hired from year to year. You must see to it that those to whom they owe service do not rule over them ruthlessly. Even if someone is not redeemed in any of these ways, they and their children are to be released in the year of Jubilee. For the Israelites belong to me as servants. They are my servants whom I brought out of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So this last section here, it says, if a foreigner, if a guy from Philistia comes and he decides, I'm going to live in Israel, and he starts enslaving people, God says, you're living in Israel here, so you're going to obey the rules that I set up. And God says, if Israelite becomes a slave of a foreigner living in Israel, that won't happen. It'll happen the way I prescribe, and it's going to be just like the other ways, where it's not a permanent slave thing. It's only until the year of Jubilee, okay? And they can be redeemed, okay? So this foolishness of like, you're going to be a slave for life, that won't happen here in Israel. You might sell yourself as a slave for a time period, and you can be redeemed at any time during that time period, but you will be guaranteed to be set free during the year of Jubilee. Okay, if you live in the land, it didn't matter who owned you. If it was a foreigner or an Israelite in the nation of Israel, you were to be set free in the year of Jubilee. But what I want you to see from this is this, that the people of Israel weren't to be profiting off of each other like that. Don't be taking each other slaves, and if a brother gets into trouble, don't be hiking up the food prices for him and charging him payday loans and title loans and goofy stuff like that. Take care of him like you would your brother. Okay? So, hey, thanks for watching. I'm just a regular dude walking in the Word, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow as we continue our journey through Leviticus. Lord's blessing. I'll see you then.